What I believed about success. I spent most of my life believing that success was something you had to chase relentlessly, that it demanded urgency, sacrifice, and an almost stubborn refusal to slow down, because I was convinced that once I reached a certain point, everything else would naturally fall into place. I believed success was proof of responsibility, that working longer hours and carrying heavier burdens meant I was doing the right thing, not just for myself, but for everyone who depended on me, even if they never asked for that kind of sacrifice. I told myself that exhaustion was temporary, that missed moments could always be made up later, and that life would patiently wait for me to finish building something solid before asking anything meaningful in return. At the time, it all felt logical and justified. I admired discipline, respected ambition, and measured progress by numbers, milestones, and external approval, believing those were reliable signs that I was moving in the right direction. I didn't question this mindset because it was everywhere, celebrated, rewarded, and praised, reinforced by people who looked successful and sounded certain, leaving no room to doubt that this was simply how life was supposed to be lived. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't chasing success as much as I was running from stillness, because slowing down would have forced me to listen to questions I wasn't ready to answer yet. Back then, I truly believed that success would eventually give me permission to rest, to reconnect, and to finally feel present, but I never considered the possibility that the cost of reaching it might be far greater than I was prepared to pay. The years I quietly gave away. I gave away years of my life in small, unremarkable pieces, not all at once, but slowly enough that I barely noticed what was disappearing, because it felt easier to keep moving than to stop and admit how tired I had become. My days blurred together, early mornings, late nights, constant urgency, until exhaustion felt normal and rest felt undeserved, as if slowing down meant I was failing some invisible test I never remembered signing up for. I missed dinners without announcing it, skipped conversations without explaining, and let silence fill the spaces where connection should have been, convincing myself that my absence had meaning even when it only created distance. Each year I told myself the same lie, that things would slow down soon, that this pace was temporary, without realizing that the faster I moved, the further soon drifted away from me. I learned how to be physically present but emotionally elsewhere, nodding while my mind stayed busy, listening without hearing, responding without really connecting, slowly becoming a stranger in rooms I once felt at home in. There were moments when I felt something was wrong, but I pushed the feeling aside, because acknowledging it would have meant questioning the very life I had built my identity around. By the time I noticed how empty the days felt, I had already taught myself how to endure instead of how to feel, mistaking survival for strength and silence for stability. Those years didn't end with a clear breaking point, they simply faded away, leaving behind a version of me who had learned how to function, but forgotten how to truly be present. When it looked like I was winning. From the outside, this was the chapter everyone admired, the part of my life that finally justified all the years of pressure, absence, and exhaustion, because the results were visible and impossible to ignore. The company grew, the numbers climbed, and my name began circulating in rooms where decisions were made, spoken with respect by people who had never seen the cost behind the success. Awards appeared on shelves, milestones were celebrated publicly, and people congratulated me as if I had reached something final, something permanent, assuming fulfillment naturally followed achievement. I smiled when expected, nodded through praise, and played my role well, even as a quiet emptiness settled in places I didn't know how to name or explain. The strange part was how loneliness blended into success, hiding in plain sight, because it's easy to assume someone surrounded by people and opportunity must feel complete. I owned more, earned more, and controlled more than ever before, yet felt less connected to the moments unfolding around me, as if I was watching my own life from a distance. Success kept me busy enough to ignore the silence, but not fulfilled enough to quiet it, leaving me caught between gratitude for what I had and discomfort for what I couldn't feel. That was when I realized that achievement can be loud enough to drown out questions for a while, but never strong enough to answer them. What success never warned me about. Success never warned me that it would change what felt normal, that it would slowly rewrite my priorities without asking permission, until things that once mattered deeply began to feel distant and strangely optional. It didn't tell me that the first thing it would take wasn't happiness, but time, quietly, steadily, until my days felt full yet somehow unfinished. Then it took attention, training me to look forward instead of around, to measure progress instead of presence, until I stopped noticing how much of life was happening without me. Success also taught me how to postpone emotions, how to store discomfort for later, assuming there would always be a quieter moment to deal with it, a moment that never actually arrived. Without realizing it, I began replacing connection with control, believing that managing everything efficiently was the same as caring deeply, even as the distance between me and others quietly grew. The scariest part wasn't the loss itself, but how reasonable it all seemed at the time, how easy it was to justify every trade-off as necessary, responsible, and temporary. By the time I noticed the cracks, success had already shaped me into someone who knew how to function perfectly, but struggled to sit still with his own thoughts. That was when I understood the truth success never mentions, that it can give you everything you asked for, while slowly taking the parts of you that knew why you asked in the first place. The realization that came too late. The realization didn't arrive with drama or collapse, but with silence, the kind that settles in when there's nothing left to distract you from what you've been avoiding for years. I had everything I once worked toward, yet nothing around me felt alive, as if the world had gone quiet the moment I finally stopped moving. That was when I understood that achievement doesn't fill the spaces absence creates, no matter how impressive it looks from the outside. I noticed how few people truly knew me anymore, and how much effort it took to remember when that distance first began, because it had grown quietly, year by year. The hardest part wasn't the loneliness itself, but realizing how much of it I had personally constructed, decision by decision, believing each one was harmless on its own. There were no villains to blame, no single moment to undo, just a long trail of small choices that added up to a life that no longer felt like home. I tried to sit with the silence, but without the noise of work and ambition, old emotions surfaced, regret, grief, and the weight of time that would never return. That was when I realized the cruelest truth of all: you don't always feel loss when it happens, you feel it when there's no longer anything you can do about it. From that moment on, success no longer felt like a victory, but like a monument built over years I would never get back. What I would do differently. If I could return to those earlier years, I wouldn't try to rewrite everything or erase the struggle, because effort itself was never the mistake, it was what I ignored while I was making it. I would learn to pause without guilt, to stop measuring my worth by how busy I looked, and to understand that rest isn't a reward you earn after exhaustion, it's a responsibility you owe yourself and others. I wouldn't rush through conversations or listen with half my attention, because presence is not about time spent, but about attention given when someone chooses to share it with you. I would protect ordinary moments the way I once protected deadlines, understanding that the small, unremarkable days are the ones quietly shaping who we become. I would choose fewer things, but choose them more carefully, accepting that saying no is sometimes the most honest way to stay connected to what truly matters. I would allow myself to be unfinished, to move at a pace that life can keep up with, instead of constantly running ahead of it. Most of all, I would stay longer in moments that don't announce their importance, because those are the ones I now remember most clearly. I wouldn't try to live perfectly, I would try to live attentively, knowing now that presence is the only thing time cannot take from you unless you give it away. The only advice I have left. If there is one thing I've learned after everything I've built and everything I've lost, it's that life doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for presence. You don't need to slow your ambition or abandon your goals to be present, you just need to stop postponing your life until some imagined finish line finally appears. The people who matter most won't remember how busy you were or how hard you worked, they'll remember how it felt to be with you when it counted. So if someone chooses to share a moment with you, give them more than your schedule, give them your attention, because attention is the rarest form of respect. Don't wait for clarity, stability, or success to start showing up fully, because life doesn't become meaningful after it's figured out, it becomes meaningful while it's being lived. If you ever feel behind, tired, or unsure, remember that being present is not falling behind, it's returning to where life has been happening all along. And if one day you look back and wonder what truly mattered, it won't be the things you chased, but the moments you stayed for. That is the only advice I have left, not because it guarantees happiness, but because it's the one thing I wish I had understood before time taught me the hard way.